Welcome to Married to History, where we try to be informative, entertaining, and family-friendly.
Aloha, I'm Christopher. I have a fancy piece of paper on my wall that says that I know more about history than most people do.
I'm Shirley. I'm a homeschool mom that relies on good curriculum, Christopher, and West Side Story to teach our kids history.
Too many people I knew in high school were obsessed with that musical.
It's a good one.
Before we get into our episode, let's take a minute to talk about something from a past episode. It's important to keep in mind that Shirley doesn't warn me about our topic beforehand.
Yep, it's fun for me to see what he knows right off the top of his head, and that means sometimes we miss things. If you would like to hear a more comprehensive and well-prepared episode on any topic, just let us know. So, honey, what have we learned since last time?
I don't know.
Are you serious?
What?
I told you, right before we started.
You'd wanted me to share that thing about Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
Was there anything else?
The fruit companies.
Oh, the fruit companies. That's right. All right. So a while back, we had talked about how fruit companies were largely responsible for the banana republics and for a lot of the bad reputation.
For the oppression of millions of people. I don't know, millions.
Before you interrupted me, I was going to say, and for the bad reputation that the United States gets on foreign matters. So yes, there was the Standard Fruit, there was the United Fruit Company, which is the one I remember, which becomes Chiquita. The other one was Standard Fruit Company, which becomes Dole today.
Yes.
So yes, the United Fruit Company and Standard Fruit Company still exist today. They've rebranded themselves, but they still exist.
Yep. And then the other thing about Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay. Did you call her the worst?
The first.
Okay. So this was a theory that one historian proposed, and I imagine that there are other historians that agree with this, and I kind of like the idea too. So I remember being taught in history books that Elizabeth never married because she didn't want to share power with a man.
Right.
And probably second place, her idea was that, no man that she would marry would possibly run for or care for England better than she could.
Right.
But another theory that somebody proposed, and I thought, hey, this is a good one. I like this one. Was that it's significant to remember that Elizabeth grew up with at least 2 or 3 of her father's wives, and she knows what happened to her. No, so she grew up with 5 of her father's wives,
right.
And she was well aware of what happened to her mother. She saw what happened to wife number 5. I believe wife number 6 was very nice to her. I think 5 was nice to her also, but anyway, she saw what her father did with all of his wives, and certainly this was not the only exposure she had to how men treated their wives in this time period. Supposedly she mentioned to at least one friend in her childhood that she refused never to marry because she was never going to allow herself to become a property or to be mistreated like she was seeing all these wives do. So she vowed from a very young age that she was never going to marry.
It makes a lot of sense. The girl was traumatized.
Be thankful that she didn't end up like Caligula. That was a Roman emperor who was raised by a truly psychotic man.
He was traumatized, and he traumatized others.
Yes.
That would definitely not be a family-friendly episode if we went into details about Caligula.
No, we're not going to talk about Caligula.
No.
I mean, Caracalla is more fun than Caligula. It's still messed up.
Okay, I looked something up. So we talked about in our Queen Elizabeth I episode about how Henry did have a son that he did accept as not necessarily his heir, but it was an illegitimate son that he
recognized him as a son. Okay.
Yeah. So I looked up more about him. His name was Henry Fitzroy. Fitzroy literally meaning son of the king. He did not hide the fact that this was his son, even though he was not born to one of his wives. His mother was one of Catherine of Aragon's ladies-in-waiting.
I think several of his children were.
Yeah. But so you had thought that maybe his mom was Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. That's not correct. So this was a lady-in-waiting of Catherine of Aragon. And I think it was the only illegitimate child that he did claim.
Okay, well, but I'm talking about Anne Boleyn's sister. She did have a son. He never claimed her. Never claimed him.
Yes.
Okay.
So Mary Boleyn had 2 children. One of them was named Henry, but Henry was just a common name, right? And there is strong evidence that neither of those children were Henry's.
Oh.
That Mary Boleyn had them with someone else.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, but Henry Fitzroy was his son, was claimed by him. He became the Duke of Richmond, and he didn't inherit the throne because he died of consumption before Henry did.
Cool.
Yes, it's cool when people die. of consumption.
It's history.
Yeah.
See, you're the type of person that would say history is horrible because people died in it.
No, I'm saying there are horrible things that happened in history, and dying of consumption is horrible. And it happened in history, so that is a horrible part of history.
But it's also a part of history.
It's cool that people died of consumption.
Cool that there was this thing that has been part of our history, and yeah,
these are human beings.
Human beings die.
And you're saying it's cool.
I'm saying it's
There's something wrong with you.
That this guy died a long time ago from something that's part of our history.
Okay.
Instead of just regular old age stuff. Oh,
it's cool when people die before they
would,
reach adulthood.
I would say that it's cool if somebody died from the Black Death. I'm not implying that it's cool that this person died. I'm not saying yay for that, but I'm saying that, it was this historically significant thing that got you. That's cool to me.
I think we better move on before you lose us listeners.
Oh, yes. We are in such danger. I'm the one that brings the listeners.
I'm not sure about that. All right, honey, I have a history question for you.
I love history questions.
I would love to know who you think is the most overrated president of the United States.
Abraham Lincoln.
Didn't even have to think about
Abraham Lincoln.
And see, I knew you would answer that. But...
Did you?
Oh, absolutely. And before we get into your reasons why, I have to share why I think it's hilarious. Do you remember when we first started homeschooling, I got that package of posters? It was like American figures, American monuments for the kids to put on our walls.
I remember where you're going for this.
And which of the posters from that packet did you claim as your own?
I insisted upon the Lincoln Memorial picture.
And why would you want the Lincoln Memorial picture considering you think he's so overrated?
Because, as I'm sure our listeners will agree, one would expect that a picture of the Lincoln Memorial is going to be a picture of his statue.
Yep.
That big old statue of him sitting in that big old chair.
Yep. Like a front view, like the one we have on the penny.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But for reasons that boggle my mind, and this made it amusing to me, they took a picture of the back of the building, partially obscured by a tree.
It was from an angle. You couldn't see the statue. You couldn't see half the building.
Well, it was the back of the building, so you couldn't see it. So, if I remember correctly, upon seeing that, I thought, this is my favorite picture of the Lincoln Memorial.
Yep. It was the most ridiculous thing. None of the other pictures in that packet were weird like that. They were all, Washington Monument, the classic, you could see the whole spire, like pictures of historical figures. They were what you would expect. But they did Lincoln dirty.
They did Lincoln's memorial dirty.
They did his memorial dirty. Mm-hmm. All right, honey.
Whatever happened to that picture?
Oh, it's in a box of photo frames.
Somewhere. We just haven't unpacked it yet.
Yeah, we haven't gotten rid of it. It's just in a box. We need to find it along with our other photos.
I missed that picture.
I'm going to try and see, I don't know if you can even find that image on Google Images. It was so bonkers.
A picture of the backside of the Lincoln Memorial, partially
from an
obscured
angle
by a tree.
with a tree. All right, so tell me, why is Abraham Lincoln the most overrated president of the United States?
I think that Abraham Lincoln is the most overrated president of the United States because he gets a lot of credit for things that he did not do, and people ignore the nefarious things that were done under his presidency.
How dare you? He is the great emancipator.
He emancipated nobody.
That's slanderous.
That is not slanderous. That is fact. So, I want to be clear. The Emancipation Proclamation is probably the most famous thing that he gets credit for. I'm not saying that there aren't other really famous things he gets credit for, but I think the Emancipation Proclamation is probably a top contender for the #1 spot.
Definitely.
If you read the Emancipation Proclamation, in fact, this is what the document was. It was basically Lincoln telling the southern states, the states that are in rebellion, if you don't surrender right now, all your slaves are free. That is tantamount today to President Biden telling Vladimir Putin, if you don't surrender now, you have to empty all your prisons. What reason would Putin have to take that seriously, to do anything other than laugh hysterically and maybe wipe his butt with that piece of paper?
Seems effective.
The Emancipation Proclamation did not free any slaves. Often enough, when Union soldiers were, I'm not saying all the time, but often enough when Union soldiers did delve deeper into the South as the war was going in their favor, and they were able to liberate slaves from time to time, these slaves did not get liberty these slaves were put to work by the soldiers to do scouting or to do labor.
Were they paid though?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah,
I don't recall them. I don't recall them ever being. If they were paid, they were probably paid in stuff. So one could.
They were fed.
And I'm not saying that like their life in service to the Union Army wasn't necessarily better than their life in slavery to the Southerners, but yeah. In a classic case of war and a classic case of politics and propaganda, yeah, you rail against somebody for doing one thing, but then you do it yourselves and you don't think anything about it.
Right.
This is another popular misconception of the time. Well, yes, there was this big abolition movement to end slavery. There was not a big movement to recognize Black Americans or Black men in general as equals in society. Lincoln himself, if I remember correctly, said that no, he had no illusions of a Black man being equal to a white man. They just wanted slavery to end.
That was just
because
a step
slavery
too
was
far.
a scourge, yeah. And think about it, it's very much like today. Society has always had, or humanity, I should say, has always had this us versus them kind of mentality.
Right.
People throughout time have always wanted a reason to say, I am better, or my group is better than you or your group. And people have found any reason under the sun for this. Religious reasons, political reasons, skin color reasons, language reasons, educational reasons, wealth reasons is probably, I would imagine, well, wealth and political reasons, I would say, are probably the number ones in much of the world today.
Right.
But yeah, this was another thing. So while there was a big campaign for ending slavery, and a lot of the soldiers that did fight in the war had an opinion on slavery, the idea that Black men were supposed to be equal after it was all over was not a popular idea.
Right. So hold on.
Sorry. One other thing before you, to go further on back to the Emancipation Proclamation and how it didn't free anybody. Slavery was still legal in several states of the United States, particularly the border states that did not leave the Union. They still had slaves. I've heard some reports, I've never read anything that confirmed this, but supposedly some people that worked in the White House had slaves working for them in the White House.
What?
Like I said, I've never read anything myself that confirms that or that I could use as proof of that, but I've heard these rumors before. Don't know if it's true or not, but it was true that slavery was not outlawed in those border states, and despite the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln never freed any of those slaves in those states.
Was it just an oversight, like he didn't realize that there were states on the Union side that still had slaves?
Well, I suppose that's certainly
I would hope he would know.
I would suppose that is certainly possible, but it is highly unlikely. In the classic case of politics, he probably omitted it on purpose because he knew if he did, he risked those states joining the Confederacy. So, in another classical political game, you tout one thing, but you're willing to let the people that you need or the people that you're willing to ignore it to achieve some other goal.
Right. Let your buddies keep doing it.
I would dare say this is politics 101, and decry against one thing when your adversaries do it, but if your friends do it, just hush it up, ignore it, pretend like it's not happening, and maybe nobody will notice.
I freaking hate politics. Okay, so was the Emancipation Proclamation issued more with the thought of when we defeat you, you Confederates, not if, but when we defeat you, then we are going to free all your slaves? Is that what it really was about?
No, because again, it made no pretense about the war ending. The Emancipation Proclamation was a call to surrender. It also, again, didn't cover the border states that still had slavery. Honestly, my opinion of the Emancipation Proclamation is that no, this was a desperate act. Part of the reason why I suspect, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other historians agree with me on this, I don't know. It's very hard to actually sit down and talk about the Civil War and a lot of things that go on it.
There's too many emotions involved.
There are too many people that have a lot of high opinions on there, not a lot of people that want to cite their evidence or anything to that case. And I'm not going to say that I'm not
perfect.
immune to that. I am not perfect. I know that I have incomplete information and flaws. This is why I want to talk to more people and why I laugh hysterically whenever some people, knowing nothing more than their GED level of education about the Civil War, tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Gee, have you had a personal experience with that?
Yeah, a friend of mine who said that she stopped listening to me because she didn't like what I say about the Civil War, and then admitted not very long afterwards that she didn't know anything about the Civil War. Sorry, so I digress.
Quite
a bit of digress. What was I talking about? I don't recall.
I don't even know.
Sorry, the Emancipation Proclamation. Right.
Yes.
So we know that the Emancipation Proclamation, or at least the idea of it, was authored before it was actually issued. Okay. We know Lincoln was sitting on it for a while because he knew that, all right, I can't say this until we can give the illusion that we're giving this as a position of strength, which says that it was written in recognition of weakness. He waited for a victory, for something that he could use to tout it as looking like this is coming from a position of strength.
Okay.
Now, what he ended up choosing, probably out of fear that this was the best he was going to get, but also just of the maybe a shortness of time, he ended up choosing the Battle of Antietam. Northerners called it the Battle of Antietam. Southerners called it the Battle of Sharpsburg. You'll find this throughout history.
There's two names for everything.
The South named the battlefields after the nearest town. The North named the battlefields after the nearest body of water, usually.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. So after the Battle of Antietam, which was seriously at best a draw. Northerners claimed it as a victory. Southerners, I think, recognized it as a draw. I think most historians today will tell you it was a draw. Okay. Because both armies, that battle, that was the single bloodiest day of fighting that happened throughout the war, if I remember correctly.
Like more than Gettysburg?
Well, Gettysburg took place over 3 days.
Got it. Okay, so single day.
Antietam was a single day, yeah. I do not remember. I know the casualties for Gettysburg were like 53,000. I don't remember the casualties for Antietam off the top of my head.
Okay.
But anyway, Antietam's single bloodiest day. Like I said, it was a stalemate. The Confederacy failed in their ambitions to invade and cause major damage into the North, but at the same time, the Union failed to cut off Lee's army and destroy him before they could retreat back to Virginia. So it was a draw. But Lincoln decided, you know what? We'll take it. North slapped it all over the newspapers, called it a major victory because they did turn Lee around.
Okay.
And thus, he released the Emancipation Proclamation from a position of strength.
Right.
Basically, it was kind of like the idea of, hey, Southerners, we just whopped your army, so now surrender, or else all your slaves are going to be free.
So was it mostly propaganda to get more support in the North?
So that, honestly, I don't know. So this is the one thing that I think is actually cool and awesome about the Emancipation Proclamation. The one thing that it did actually achieve, whether Lincoln intended this or not, I don't know.
Okay.
If the authors of it, be it Lincoln or other people, intended for this, then they were freaking brilliant. If they didn't, then they were freaking lucky.
Okay.
So what the Emancipation Proclamation did do is that it is at this point, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Northern propaganda, at least, is that this war is about slavery. Before this time, the war was not about slavery. Ask Northerners, ask Southerners. Some of you might tell you that the whole thing is going to start because of slavery, but in its heart, the war was about the Southerners believing that they had the right to leave the country if they wanted to. People often say that, oh yeah, they were fighting for their rights, the right to own slaves. No.
But that was one of them.
Yeah, that was a right they wanted to keep, but they were fighting for their right to leave if they didn't want to be part of the Union anymore. Okay. And on the northern end, and Lincoln confirms this himself, it wasn't about slavery, it was about keeping the country together. And this is actually a fair argument. So this is one of the reasons why I love discussing this. To use some of our founding documents, for example, let's take the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
The Declaration of Independence clearly says in its wording that, and I'm going to paraphrase here, in its wording that if people believe that the government no longer have its best interests at heart, it is the right of the people to rebel, to leave,
it's like their
to
duty
form their own new government. Yeah, it's like their duty. And in the Southern mind frame, this is what they were doing.
Okay.
However, that said, our nation operates on a democratic principle. The idea that more often than not, the majority, I'm not saying we're democracy, but the idea of the democratic principle is that the majority is going to win. And this really only functions if the minority accepts that they've lost. When it comes to the presidential election, even though Lincoln said he had no intention of getting rid of slaves.
Wait, he said that?
Yeah, Lincoln said that he had no intention of getting rid of the slaves.
He's a freaking politician.
It was in his campaign promises. He said, oh, no, I'm not going to get rid of slavery. But here's the problem. He was a Republican.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party, even though Lincoln was a moderate, the Republican Party, it was absolutely, unabashedly anti-slavery. That's the whole reason the party came to be.
So he went against his party platform by saying that.
Yes.
Wow.
So even though he promised that, Southerners had no reason to believe him. He was a Republican.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, the Republican Party was founded on the principle of we are going to get rid of slavery.
Wow.
So they had no reason to believe that this Republican guy is actually going to keep this promise that he made. Because seriously, who among us actually think a presidential candidate is going to keep his campaign promises?
I certainly don't.
I seem to recall Biden saying that he was running as a moderate.
Well, they're always moderate when it comes to
I'm just picking on the most recent one. I'm not saying that Biden is the only one that does this.
They all do it. That's the problem. They all do it.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the Civil War. So yes, in the beginning, Lincoln in the South, the idea was that, all right, that the South, they were fighting because they wanted to leave. They believed they had the right to leave and to form their own country, their own government.
Okay.
The North was fighting because, no, you don't have that right to leave. Democracy falls apart if the losers don't accept that they lost.
Right.
Think about some of the modern things today, elections that don't go people's way. When a lot of Democrats and people on the left were mad that Trump won, and now a lot of people on the right were mad when Biden won, all of a sudden you saw these people saying that, oh, rebellion, we gotta quit. No, how dare you? This can't possibly happen. We must have been cheated. No, you gotta accept that you lost.
Right.
It happens from time to time. Sometimes you're gonna win, sometimes you're gonna lose.
Right.
And if the losers do not accept that they've lost, then that's when you get into scary, dangerous kind of territory. And in this case, with the South, they didn't accept that they lost the election, or rather they weren't happy that they lost the election, so they decided to quit.
Okay.
So back to the Emancipation Proclamation. So the war starts in 61, 2 years of fighting. It is not until about Christmas time, 62, or might have been a little bit earlier. I'm forgetting the date off the top of my head.
For shame.
It's in the end of the year 62, so the war's been going on for about 2 years at this point, that Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation, and it is clear that from that point on, in the eyes of the northern states, and in the eyes of the world, because the world is going to get a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation and read this, that, this is a war to end slavery now.
Right.
And because of issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, Britain and France, and possibly other countries, but Britain and France were the two, they were courting the Confederacy. They liked the idea of being able to sell to American markets. They liked the idea of having influence over a substantial people on the American side of the world. Not to mention that the United States was a powerful entity of sorts at that time on the far side of the world, and they liked the idea of being able to disrupt the U.S.'s power base over there. There were lots of reasons, advantageous reasons, economically and politically, for Britain and France to see the United States, the Great Experiment, fail, and to have an ally over there.
Got it.
But both of those countries had outlawed slavery in the decades before the Civil War.
Right.
So now, because because the Emancipation Proclamation has made this war an anti-slavery war, there's no way the British and the French people will ever accept allying themselves with a nation that intends to continue with the institution of slavery.
Right. So did they then support the North, or they just backed out of supporting the South?
They just backed out of supporting the South at that point. Now, I want to be clear. They did not completely back out. They still did send some aid nominally, but there was never... The South never got what the 13 colonies got out of France.
Oh, okay.
If the 13 colonies hadn't gotten what they got from France, military support, money, and everything, then the 13 colonies probably would not have succeeded in rebelling and creating the United States. Likewise, without the British and the French directly intervening, the South really didn't have much of a chance. Despite everything else, the naval blockade was crippling the South. They needed to be able to trade stuff and to get in new supplies, and they couldn't do it.
Okay. So after the war then, as soon as the North is declared as the winner, then slavery is ended, right? Lincoln gets on the podium and is like, everyone's free, right?
So slavery doesn't end until the passage of the 13th Amendment. And
how long did that take?
So I want to be clear. Slavery doesn't end until the passage of the 13th Amendment. Yeah. Lincoln was dead before the 13th Amendment was passed.
Yeah.
And I want to point out another thing. The 13th Amendment was an act of Congress, not an act from the office of the presidency. The president does not have the power or the authority to amend the Constitution. Congress does, and Congress carried it out.
So wait, did the Emancipation Proclamation even take effect to free the slaves in the South once the war was over? It did nothing.
No.
Nothing,
like I said,
like it didn't...
Like I said, it freed nobody.
Oh my freaking goodness. It was propaganda.
It was propaganda, entirely a piece of propaganda.
It did work out. Like, it was helpful.
Yes, so I want to be clear. I know that I have this problem. I'm one of those people where I favor the underdog. So an awful lot of the time, it comes out like I am pro-South. No. I am happy that the South lost the war for reasons that are probably warrant discussion in another episode.
That's complicated.
I am happy that the South lost the war because I think that the world today would be a truly awful place, or different place, if they had succeeded.
Yeah.
So I am happy that the country stayed together.
So does that mean
that said, I am also still happy of still proud of my Southern heritage. I got a little bit of that. But I am happy that the country stayed together.
Right. Okay, so is there any other reason why Lincoln is overrated? Because every president does this. They say something grand, they get quoted, but then they don't actually accomplish something. There has to be more than one reason for Lincoln for you to say he's the most overrated.
Okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation, we've been talking a lot about that. So amongst other things, we know that Lincoln was a president that did violate the Constitution on more than a couple of occasions.
Pause. Do you hear that thunder?
Yes, I heard that thunder. No, I do not think that Zeus is trying to tell me, how dare you speak so evil about Lincoln.
No, I just want to say, I apologize to the listeners. If that bothers you, I can't do anything about it.
Don't think that's an artificial sound effect you put in there because I said...
We don't have, like, good sound capabilities here. We do the best we can.
And I'll remind you, Alexander said that Zeus's thunder was an omen of good fortune, not bad.
Okay.
It was Zeus's approval.
Got it.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you, and I don't even remember what you were saying.
Was something about... Oh, sorry. Okay, other reasons why I think Lincoln is overrated.
Yes.
Right. Lincoln, I think, honestly, would have been a blip on the Facebook on the notes of history if it hadn't been for the Civil War. Everything about his presidency was consumed by the war. Now, to be fair, he never really had the chance to be president outside of the war because it was taken up during the entire course of his presidency. So I am willing to believe that, okay, he might have actually done a notable job if the war hadn't happened. I mean, I don't know how he would have tackled other things.
Right.
But I want to point out some things. So he failed a lot in his life. He tried many different business ventures over his years, and he was not very successful at all of them. Then all of a sudden became president of the United States. I'm not saying he was a failure at everything.
He was a lawyer. Like, wasn't he a good lawyer?
He was a lawyer. If I remember correctly, he wasn't a good one. He was a fair one.
Okay.
But I don't remember him getting a lot of praise or anything, or people noticing, oh, hey, yeah, it's the Lincoln guy. Oh, he's great. And the Republican Party specifically ran him because he was a nobody. They wanted to run a moderate. So the Republican Party was created in 1954. They run their first presidential candidate in 1956. The guy was too extreme, too far to the Republican ideals. They were called the Radical Republicans back then because, believe it or not, back then it was the Republicans who were the leftists, the liberals, the crazy ones, whatever you want to call it.
The abolition.
Lincoln outlawed a lot of civil rights. He got rid of habeas corpus, for example, for a time. It was illegal to say anything pro-Confederacy. Oh, sorry. Habeas means he eliminated people's rights to fair trials. He eliminated certain trial evidences that needed to be presented in order for you to be convicted.
What?
He got rid of freedom of speech on a scale. You were not allowed to criticize the government, his government, and you were not allowed to say anything pro-Confederacy. You were thrown in prison for that.
What?
So we can understand why he did those things. Plenty of leaders throughout history, especially political leaders, have done that sort of thing. You've outlawed, how dare you say something pro the bad guys and con the good guys, or pro the away team and con the home team.
Well, and like we have the Patriot Act and stuff. We feel like there's a need.
But nonetheless,
for this.
These are American rights that the president violated, or that were violated with the president's authority during the Civil War years. Additionally, Lincoln brought back the draft, forcing people to fight in this war that, by the end of it, the Northerners didn't want to fight in by enough anymore. And he was drafting people. A lot of these people weren't even really Americans that were getting drafted. So probably the best case scenario of this, or best study for this, is going to be the New York riots. At least I believe they happened in New York, particularly among the Irish. An awful lot of Irish were coming to America. And I kid you not, they would get off the boat, set foot on American soil, and then some army rep or government rep would grab him and say that, hey, you come to this country, you're going to fight for this country. And send them off to go fight.
God. gosh.
The drafts were, so first off, drafting is never a popular thing. I mean, nobody likes drafts. We in America, we hate drafts because most of us Americans alive today remember Korea and Vietnam. We don't like drafts.
Right.
One of the other things that made the draft so unpopular was you could buy your way out of it. If I remember correctly, the price was like somewhere between $350, $400.
The rich can always have the advantage.
Which to you and I is nothing today. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of people that would have gladly paid $400 to get out of serving in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. But it was actually...
But at that point in time, no, that was a substantial amount of money. Yeah. And I guarantee you no poor Irish kid getting off that boat had $400 in his pocket to not go off and fight in a country that wasn't even his.
Right.
And oh man, on that subject, I can't tell you how many Irish people ended up shooting at each other during the war because some sad. Irish settled in the South.
So hold up. So you were saying.
So he got rid of a lot of fair court procedures. I don't remember all the details of them off the top of my head. And I'd be lying to you if I said I remember what habeas corpus is. It means produce the body, but I never really remember what the actual legal reference to it is. It's something that I have to keep looking up to say, all right, when they say that, this is what they mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he suspended a lot of trial rights. He suspended free speech. He instituted the draft. A lot of his policies were just entirely based on war, not really too much about, not that much was done about the railroads, for example, while he was the president.
Because his focus was on the war.
Yes, because his focus was on the war. So this is why I think that he is overrated. To be fair, the war consumed all of his time, really didn't give him a chance to do anything that wasn't war related. But the things that we do give him credit for were not actually that grand of an achievement. Like the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't the thing that people said it is. He is not the great emancipator. He did not emancipate people. And then we ignore the nefarious things that he did. Even if we can understand them, you cannot deny that they were nefarious things. They were things that a president is not supposed to do, that is not supposed to happen in the United States.
But in wartime, we give them more leeway. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that happens every time.
So, like, amongst other things, another one of those kind of double standards, I guess you could say, if you will, during the election. So there's another presidential election while the war is still going on, the election of 1864. Lincoln is running for re-election. His opponent, I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, but is very much I'm going to end the war immediately if I win the presidency.
Okay.
Or at least I think that was his campaign. Now I'm having some doubt about that. Anyway, but yeah, there was a lot of, and like I said, this happens all the time, there were an awful lot of people in the northern states that were beating up Democrats that tried to come up and vote.
Really?
Yeah, so back in those days, you wore a pin with a color ribbon on it to represent
see who
what
you support.
Yeah, to represent.
Campaign T-shirt or whatever.
You walked up. I don't remember if the colors were blue and red at the time. I think they were. I think the Democrats were blue and the Republicans were red. But yeah, if you walked up with whatever the color was, I'm going to say blue. If you walked up with a blue ribbon, they were going to come up with everything that you've heard about stopping black people from voting in the South during the Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
They tried those same tricks, everything under the sun they could, to deny a Democrat from voting in the northern states. Sympathizers for the Confederacy during the Civil War in the North were known as copperheads because they're traitorous serpents.
Oh, like a copperhead snake.
like a copperhead snake. And there was an awful lot of prejudice against them.
I mean, I get it. But how's that Lincoln's fault?
Again, I want to make sure we can get... Well, I'm not saying those things are Lincoln's fault. I'm just saying that that's what life was like. No, I'm not saying that those things were Lincoln's fault. Lincoln's fault was denying the trial rights, denying the freedom of speech, denying criticism of himself. Those things that we can blame on the Lincoln administration. But, try to be fair with this, one could argue that we don't necessarily know how much of it was Lincoln was behind this, Lincoln authorized this, Lincoln did that, versus his cabinet did this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah, right. But he was the president. He
was the president, and yes, we usually say, like, even if the captain of the ship isn't the one that did some bad crime, he's responsible for the members of his crew. Yeah. So yes, I this is why I think Lincoln is the most overrated. I am not saying he is the worst. I think he is the most overrated.
I guess that would be a different question, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. I say, if you ask me who is the worst,
save that for another day. Think about it.
I think my answer is going to get me in a lot of trouble.
Ooh, now we need to know. No, we don't. I don't want you to be too controversial. It scares me.
I'm not saying anything.
You can't get canceled before we even get famous, honey.
Aren't we already famous? Don't our
10
tens
whole
of loyal listeners?
Tens. True.
Thank you to our tens of loyal listeners.
All right, is there anything else that I need to know about why Lincoln was a horrible person?
Never said he was a horrible person. Never said that.
Is there anything else I need to know about why Lincoln should be taken off the penny and the $5 bill?
Never said that either, although I wouldn't fight against him getting taken off as much as I would have fought against Alexander Hamilton getting taken off.
Is there anything else I need to know about Lincoln, about why we should tear down his monument?
Never said that either. Maybe turn around, plant more trees around it.
Plant more trees. Block every photographer. All right, is that it for today then?
So, do you mean to ask me, is there any more reasons for why I think that Lincoln is an overrated president?
Sure.
No, I'm comfortable for now. I'm sure I'll think of like a million things 5 minutes after you cut off the microphone.
Yeah, that's how it goes. You could always script a comprehensive episode all about Lincoln if you want to.
I could, but until a fan asks me to, I rather enjoy just you asking me a question and me answering off the top of my head.
This is a fun
format.
Yeah,
I enjoy that I don't have to prepare for this.
Yep, and why is that? Because you have no work ethic. I'm pretty sure you said that in the last episode.
I probably did, yeah, it's fair. I was about to yell at you and say, how dare you criticize me? But
no,
then,
I'm quoting.
You pointed that out.
Quoting you.
That's a fair cop.
All right, thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a 5-star review.
If you'd like to hear a future episode with more information about today's topic, contact us on Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Married to History Pod.
Also, please contact us if you have a silly question idea or if there's something from history that you would love to learn about.
If you want to hear who my least favorite president is or the president that I think was the worst, don't forget to like and subscribe. Is subscribing a thing on this? I don't know. Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Because they can subscribe on all the different podcast apps.
Oh, cool. Well, then like and subscribe and share with your friends.
All right, we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. And now, of course, it's going to be loud outside.
Maybe it's actually a blessing that the microphone doesn't appear to be picking up all that much.
Well, testing. Yeah, the microphone's working.
Okay.
And it is going to pick up all that because it picks up like all the motorcycle and stuff. I mean, maybe it's not terribly distracting for the average listener, but I notice it when I'm editing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can hear all the motorcycles outside and whatnot.
Well, you tell me then. Are we going to do an episode or not?
Oh, let's do it. All right, put your phone away.
Make me. See, this is another reason why history is superior. Nobody had to worry about their microphone not working up 100 years ago. Actually, no, that would not be right. So nobody had to worry about their microphone not working about 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I'm like all paranoid now that it's not working. It looks like it is.
Well, it's not like you're going to waste any more than a couple of hours if this, of your time if this doesn't end up working. He's a good little microphone. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Who's the cutest little microphone in the world?
That's weird.
You're weird.
That's the outro. I was about to read the outro.
There's just nothing going right with you today, is there?
No, not at all.
So they ran somebody that was...
Oh my gosh.
You okay?
That scared me. Like, did your TV turn off?
Was it on?
I saw a flash.
We lost power.
I saw a flash.
Yeah, we lost power.
Okay, my computer's charged, so we're fine. That freaked me out. Sorry.
So, where was I again?
I don't even know.
Okay. So Lincoln abused.